everybody. I'm Mike Bizard. Alan Schimmel is still out on vacation, but today we're going to be talking about, well, a chip crisis, interest rates, and what's the value of a 4-year college degree these days. You're watching Techstrong, gang. We'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, we're back, and let me introduce our august panel today. We have Cory Johnson, who is joining us as Chief Market Strategist for the Futurum Group. Cory, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
And then, as always, we have Mitch Ashley, who is joining us from Denver, per usual. I think that's still Denver, right?
Still Denver this morning, as of this morning anyway.
And finally, one of our relatively newer members of the gang, who's a regular, Jon Schwartz, who's out in San Francisco, giving us that perspective of the Valley. Jon, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Hi, everybody.
All right. In fact, both Cory and Jon are in the Bay Area, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah, looks like Bay Area. Because sun's coming up. There's naked people on the street.
Just as typical.
San Francisco.
Sounds like Vegas. Okay.
There's a visual for everybody. Some of those folks are just coming home, right? All right. Cory, let's get started with you. It seems like Wall Street got rocked by a report. Not sure it's even been confirmed yet that the United States government is thinking about applying some more restrictions to chip production, exports, imports, and all that good stuff. Stocks went crazy. What is actually going on here? And can you make some sense of it for the average IT individual? What should they be thinking about here?
Yeah, well, I like to look at things in the perspective of earnings. I spend a lot of time building financial models, listening to company conference calls, talking to company management. And ASML, the lithography equipment manufacturer that is the company behind the creation of the most impressive and incredible semiconductors. It has been argued that the ASML makes the most complicated machines in the history of mankind. And I that's an absolute true fact. ASML reported results yesterday that were pretty good, but they weren't great. Revenues were down 10% on a year-over-year basis. But the stock sold off massively after the results came out. And the reason was ASML's sales to China were 49% of revenues. 6 quarters ago, they were 8% of revenues. So the company is really relying on sales to China amidst a global reduction of their ability to sell to China. Both in Europe and the U.S. has banned the company from selling the most progressive, powerful EUV machines into China. And there was some reporting from Bloomberg this week, my former colleagues, reporting that the sales of other equipment and even servicing equipment would be banned even more so in China. And so when you take a company that has 49% of its sales, your largest customer is China, and says that the government's going to come in and say you can't sell to China anymore, that hurts the stock, and indeed because it could hurt the business.
I think the thing that keeps me up at night about all this is it feels like, we're kind of stumbling towards a trade war. Am I going to wake up one morning as an IT organization and discover that processors are in short supply because all the stuff that used to come out of China is no longer available, and maybe I should start hoarding stuff now? What do you think, Cory?
I think the concern is not they're going to wake up one morning and see that it's hard to get semiconductors. The concern, and being a trade war, the concern is they're going to wake up one morning, we're in a war. China has made very clear that they intend to capture the territory that they consider a sovereign runaway nation in China. If you turn the map of the world, we're used to looking at north is up and south is down, when in fact down is the ground and up is the sky. If you turn the map of the world, just turn it a little bit sideways, and you look at how China looks at the world. They have South Korea and Japan to the north. They have the Philippines to the south, and when they want to look at the world that is open to them, it is blocked by Taiwan, which they consider part of their territory. They're very clear about their intention to invade Taiwan. They are training troops on roads in Mongolia designed like the Taiwanese capital. their goal, the notion that we're going to be in an actual war with Taiwan and what that's going to do to the world trade is a real concern. I think that we all have to think about as technology practitioners, because most of the world's semiconductors, the leading semiconductors, come from China and Taiwan.
I'm glad I'm sorry, Mike. I'm glad Cory kind of brought up this political aspect, because I look at this through a political prism, and especially through geopolitics. And I think in the Bloomberg article, Trump told the publication Business Week that Taiwan should pay the U.S. for defense, and claimed Taiwan took about 100% of America's semiconductor business. Meanwhile, you got the Biden administration considering this wide sweeping rule to clamp down on companies exporting their chip making equipment to China. I think in a sense, you're going to see probably more of this, not just pertaining to China, but even in domestic policy, because I actually think that we're going to see more of an interjection, more than we thought we would, or a raised profile of geopolitics and tech in the presidential race, for instance. I mean, it all goes down to J.D. Vance being named as Trump's running mate. We got the libertarian tech bros like Musk, Andreessen Horowitz, Thiel, who is J.D. Vance's mentor, David Sachs. And I think this is going to be something we're going to probably become accustomed to in terms of the impact on things like deregulation, taxes, cryptocurrency. I mean, I'm kind of throwing this out there because I do think there's going to be an escalation on being tough on not just China, but making a firm stance. And I actually think tech is going to play a much more prominent role from both sides, perhaps. And I think the repercussions will be, you're going to be nervous if you're a company that relies on a high degree of revenue from China, like an Apple or a Qualcomm. And I also think in terms of AI regulation, the executive order is going to go by the wayside, even though it was largely ceremonial. I think Trump, as part of their Republican platform, are going to repeal that. I think you're basically going to see tech unleashed and much more big acquisitions going on, like Google and Wiz, which is by far the biggest in Google's history. I think a lot of this stuff is just going to be percolating and simmering.
But John, I don't think there's a difference between what. Let me phrase that. I was going to say I don't think there's a difference between the potential Trump administration's plans for China and Biden. There are tremendous differences, and I think that the Biden administration, the White House, has been trying to be very aggressively containing China's technology aspirations, but being surgical in their use of all the tools in the toolkit, including tariffs. Obviously, President Trump says he wants 100% tariff on everything from 50 to 100%. He likes big round. To quote Brad Stelter, one of the people who did that interview in Bloomberg, he likes big round numbers. But I think that the surgical nature of the White House's approach to China right now, and yet the big stick they are using shows how concerning this is to both the potential Trump administration and the Biden administration, because China has been so aggressive in trying to acquire every single piece of the biggest difference in our technology versus in our U.S. technology versus the rest of the world is that it's so much more advanced that it gives us a military advantage that is not borne out by the count of warheads or tanks or troops. And that's all about semiconductors, and China knows that.
Right. Yeah, no, I have a question though for Cory. Just so we've seen the United States government say they want to invest in chips, and we want to decrease our dependency on foreign suppliers. How long does it take to build, a modern semiconductor plant that's capable of producing the chips that we need?
It's not about time. And the answer is it takes about 3 to 5 years to build. The fabs that Intel's building in Columbus, Ohio, for example, are already a year behind. They're about 4 or 5 years into it, and they're about 3 or 4 years out. So there you go. $10 billion maybe per plant, and about 7 to 10 years to build it. But more importantly, you can't build it without the right equipment. And the only company that makes the equipment to make top-end semiconductors is ASML. Now, again, the EUV machines, they've not been able to sell to China because of import restrictions. It doesn't matter. The way technologists look at chips, I think a lot, is they talk about the old chips and the 10 nanometer and the 30 nanometer, and who cares about that stuff because it's not the cutting edge, it's not the NVIDIA Blackwell. Well, the fact is China is doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on manufacturing whatever chips they can and flooding the market with those chips at low prices so that there are no other manufacturers of the foundational chips that are most of the chips that are used in automobiles, that are used in industrial, that are used even in telecommunications, and yes, used in computing and mobile. So that we need China's production of chips, and they want that to be the case, so they can control the world market and indeed control global policies that they want well beyond technology.
It's a really good point, Cory, because we think about the race of chips and the advancement of technology using for AI for lots of applications. Many applications require very mature chips that have been around for 10, 20 years. There's still even devices going into space that are built around a Motorola 2000 architecture because it's reliable. So there are different requirements. So you think about telecommunications. This isn't just about putting the latest chips in it. The availability of well-used, tried and true technology is also part of this. To me, this is all an intersection of course, geopolitical, trade, national security, and cyber. And we haven't talked about kind of the cybersecurity side of this, because if we can talk about hardware and software, but the thing that really makes it susceptible, no matter where it's located, no matter where it's being manufactured, is either embedding backdoors and Trojans and things like that allow countries to get access to technology that's been deployed. Of course, that's was a big concern around telecommunications technology for a while, but I think the key thing is we're already in this cyber detente. Now we're going into the trade detente of, who do we depend on and how do we capture as much of the market as possible? And then what's the economic impact, all that? It's a very kind of intertwined, complicated matrix of things, but ultimately it's about our national security and national defense.
To your point about that, though, we said we were going to replace all those Yahweh systems from our telecommunications network. And then there was a report last month said we don't have the money to do it. And there's still like all these systems from that company in our networks. So I kind of feel like we're in a rock and a hard place here.
Well, I think that's in part of where we were at that point in time and what the real threat from China was. I think that's escalated greatly since that point in time. And that's why you see more actions, the things that Cory and Jon are talking about. So if that debate was to happen today, maybe we'd have a different outcome. You still have the issue of the cost of doing it. But now it's about, do we allow those things to happen? So I think more and more we're going to be kind of pulling back on what we do and don't allow. And you see that in the Biden administration already. Trump kind of presents it as a different proposition of, pay us, for defense Taiwan, and we'll protect you. But still, ultimately, it's the same thing. How do we protect our shores digitally as well as physically?
All right, Cory, the next president is going to name you head of the cabinet that's responsible for all of this.
Oh, God.
What should we be doing?
I could be the next Scaramucci. I get my 10 days, and I don't. That's not an appointment I want. I can't afford the lawyer bills and the indictments. I think that we have tried to be an isolationist nation with cutting edge technologies before. In the 1920s, we tried to be an isolationist nation. We put up trade barriers all over the world. We tried to go on our own, and we couldn't do it because we relied on global trade and we needed it. And that is certainly more the case now. The idea that we don't need Taiwan, we can charge them rent for protecting our own interests. We need Taiwan to be an independent nation and produce the goods that they use because America depends on it. And COVID showed us that. COVID showed us how dependent we are on world trade. And that was just a glimpse at what it was like. And we clearly are going to need that in the future. So, the efforts by the Biden administration, even hinting at these tariffs, is meant to be a little saber rattling, I think, and tell China, we're going to take care of Taiwan because we need Taiwan.
It would seem to me, too, if we ask Taiwan to put their defense bill, all they're going to do is increase the cost of the chips to pay for it anyway. So it's kind of, we might as well just write them a check for the defense in the first place. It's not Taiwan's defense. It's our defense. We need the global community against China to protect the things that we want.
That it would also escalate things if Taiwan all of a sudden is investing significantly themselves in their own military. That kind of flips that dynamic.
And they've tripled military spending in that country in the last,
which has caused a lot of issues for China, which is why they're so hot about this.
All right, folks, no one knows for sure how this is all going to play out, but take a hard look at those supply chains that you're counting on for processors because, well, they might not be as stable as you think. Gentlemen, let's hope for peace in our time. We'll see what happens, but we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back, everybody. And we're still talking about things that happen in the realm of, well, I don't know if the Treasury Department is politics, but the Federal Reserve Board, at least, is saying that they might cut interest rates for the first time in recent memory. They're at an all-time high. And I'm not sure a half point is going to change the world dramatically, but at the very least, it kind of signals that maybe the battle to whip inflation now is finally over, at least the latest round thereof. But Mitch, let's start with you. I'm not clear that everybody kind of gets the correlation between interest rates and what happens in the tech sector because, 2-3 years ago, this place was teeming with startups that were perhaps overly subscribed and overly funded by venture capitalist firms. And then suddenly one day they all just sort of started disappearing. So connect the dot for me.
Well, pendulum swings in the startup world and the VC world, both on the economy in general, because that's the consumers of the technology that startups are creating, but also the availability of money where people are putting their dollars. And the Fed is, we've been talking about this interest rate cut. Is it going to come? When's it going to come? It seems more likely now. They're kind of hinting that they may be doing this because of housing starts are lower, inflation's dropped down in terms of its rate of increase, things like that. VCs look at it. They have funds. They're given funds. Whatever millions or billions of dollars are put into a VC fund, and they look for opportunities where the best places are to invest it. When things are tight, they look for things that have a nearer term outcome. A later round that they might invest in a company, and they'll still invest some early rounds, but they tend to pull back and be more conservative about that. Meanwhile, when you're at the startup company yourself, you're told to pull back on a lot of things, like pull back on marketing, really tighten up sales, tighten up your pipeline, and get really strong around, what are your next 30, 60, 90-day sales you're going to be making. When interest rates free up, when interest rates go down and there's more access to money, then you start to see a little bit longer horizon about how startups behave. And I'm talking more of the earlier startups that are in the 2 to 5 year kind of stage of their career. But I'm sure, Cory, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, this kind of rattling. Is the Fed going to make this cut, and how the market reacts just to the news that they might do a cut?
Yeah, but I think we can tweeze out their financial markets. Everything's connected, right? But I think we can separate the VC, what's going on in the VC world right now, to what's happening with the Fed a little bit, at least the Fed in the short term. The Fed is trying to respond to giving lots of people jobs and keeping inflation manageable. They're setting a 2% target, but the average inflation in the last 20 years is 3.1%. And the last quarter, the last inflation last month was actually deflation. So not only has inflation been coming down for, 9 months, it's actually at a deflationary level at this point. So watching the Republican convention this week, all this talk of inflation. It's like they wrote their talking points 6 months ago because we don't have inflation. They wrote their talking points about crime. Crime is down. Inflation is down. They're talking about crime and inflation. But I think that the Fed is concerned that inflation chips away on people's savings and people's ability to get ahead. They're concerned that a slowing, however, they're concerned that a slowing economy doesn't keep employment up. But wages are rising faster than inflation. Employment levels are still very high, but there's some disconcerting signs about weakness in the economy, especially for poorer people, particularly consumer spending numbers that were out this week. And it suggests the Fed's going to get what they want to do, which is lower the rate of Fed funds, which, among other things, will lower the cost of U.S. borrowing as well.
Jon, what did you see when rates started going up? Did you start seeing a lot of smaller companies in the valley kind of disappear? But at the same time, there was this AI bubble going on. So
right,
the money just
they were they were conflicted, right? They're trying to expand while also consolidating. I think at my previous employer, when I was at Dow Jones, I was heavily into writing about earnings, and it was quarter after quarter of reduced spending and operating expenses from small company to the largest company, and an era of consolidation and austerity. And I think maybe it's too early to see that trend as we enter earnings season, but I think we're going to start seeing an expansion again in terms of spending and in terms of hiring. But you're right. This is kind of an accordion-like action that's been going on throughout the industry. And I think for the first time in a long time, there's maybe an exhale of the possibility of this going down to 2%.
Right. Mitch, do you think that, at least I do, but it seems like the minute the interest rates start going up, the smaller companies start getting gobbled up by bigger companies that have some cash, and they kind of buy some of these companies for 2 cents on the dollar, and a lot of good technology winds up going to the incumbents. So does interest rates kind of favor the incumbent, and how do you feel it affects the way competition and technology advances are made?
Well, it all has to do with valuations of startups. And when money's freer, valuations tend to accelerate. But when it's pulled back, when money's less available, then suddenly the next round of investing, people are taking a haircut, and they don't want to take a haircut and put more money in at the same time. So that's oftentimes a really good way to really good time to do an acquisition of a company. So it may be overinflated in its valuation, and you can get a better deal by acquiring it versus plopping in more money with no kind of horizon of when you think that's going to deliver a return in addition to what you've already invested in it. So it's an economics. It's really just the matter of the supply of money, and have you kind of jumped ahead of now where the market's currently at in terms of your own valuation. And when you're looking at a haircut, an acquisition can be a very near-term, nice payout. Folks that have invested quite a bit of money into that company.
Jon, you think we're going to see more acquisitions or less going forward?
I think we are going to probably see more acquisitions. So we mentioned Google and Wiz. I do think so. But then again, you have to figure into the calculus the impact of FTC. I mean, they're still making it as difficult as possible or to dissuade large companies. They're not stopping them, but they're trying to dissuade them, at least from the large deals. I think it'll also, people are looking closely at the election, and when that happens, if there's a likely scenario of Trump going back to the White House, then all things are wide open. I mean, you're going to see.
I think
the activity.
The risk of pernicious companies is lower under a White House and this administration, and the FTC, which has been really concerned about companies merging to take pricing power away. But I think in terms of sort of small deals, smaller companies being acquired, I think those are going to go down with because the economy is doing so well. When companies look at what their future is, the impetus to sell right now is not great, because the economy is doing so well. You've got rates looking like they're going to come down, which means that things are going to be better in the future, right? You have this contango, if you would, in the oil and gas terms. The idea that prices are going to get higher, things are going to get better. Why would you sell now? We saw venture capital investments. The number of deals on venture capital have fallen so much. They were better last quarter than they've been in the last year, but we're still at sort of 2016 levels in terms of the number of deals being done. Venture capitalists are writing checks. I wrote a check this week. I was at dinner with a VC last night. He wrote 3 deals last week, which is a huge week. It was kind of a huge quarter for him. But deals are happening, but there are fewer of them.
And the correlation in my mind is it used to be that a venture capitalist would go to a pension fund and say, we will give you a better return on your investment than you're going to get from just parking your money in some sort of fund or whatever it is. And when interest rates go up, suddenly it becomes a lot harder for the VCs to make that promise. And so that kind of tightens up the cash flow that goes into these startups. Cory, do you think that that might loosen a little bit? I mean, what do interest rates have to come down to kind of get to the point where maybe there's more money flowing in the startups?
I think it's more about direction than a hard number. An interest rate. I remember talking to Mike Bloomberg said to me once, if rates up 75 basis points or down 75 basis points doesn't help a company make a decision as to whether they need to build a new factory. But I think the direction of rates clearly guides companies on what they want to do, where they want to grow, and how they want to spend. And it's true across the investment universe. And you're exactly right. To a pension fund, on the margin, if you're going to get 5% in treasuries, you're going to put less money into VC. If you're going to get 1% in treasuries, as we were looking at 3 years ago, you're going to put more money into venture capital because you need some outsized return on the edge.
I think that as we get to this whole issue, I have found it interesting over the years that we never really connected these dots in a way that, tech people understand, because it really does drive the level of competition in the sector. And I feel like, I don't know, Mitch, your thoughts on it, but I feel like the level of competition since interest rates rose has dropped. And I can't put my finger on it. It's more of a feeling, but I just don't see the same level of tension in the IT space, but maybe it's just me.
I wonder if this is a Mike Vizard scratch your head moment, right? Is that one of these? Yeah.
Wait, Mike, do you have a particular scratch I'm unaware of?
Yeah. We had a whole show where he scratched his head on that segment. Things that make you say, Anyway, I forgot the question now. I think it's as acquisitions happen, it feels like, the Splunk now becomes part of Cisco. Wiz might become part of Google, kind of those big ones. You see big parts of the market being consolidated, right? There's still a lot of competition. There's plenty of competition out there. And there are companies who...
Is there?
Yeah, I believe there is. I think
how many different kinds of phones can you choose from?
I'm thinking in my world...
or what?
I'm thinking in my world of security and cloud and software and DevOps and those platforms. And I mean, there's only two phones to buy, right? Well, I guess you can buy
search engines do you get to use?
Now, but yeah. What's that?
How many search engines do you choose from that you use every day?
3.
One or one?
3 different ones, actually. But yeah, I have one main one. You're right. I mean, sure. Your point is there's some areas where, it is consolidated. I'm not disagreeing.
Technology people should freaking love competition. They should love companies not merging because it gives us opportunity. In security, you see this, right? In security, you see dozens or hundreds of solutions to problems. And if you had 3 dominant, with phones, my example earlier, if you had 2 companies doing security, you know what we have? Insecurity. You already have insecurity. As technologists, we want to be able to come to the market with new creations and new solutions to problems. We don't want monopolies. We don't want big companies gobbling up all the dollars that are spent so that we can't try to innovate and create new solutions. We need competition. We want competition. We get rich off of competition.
There's the other side of it too. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, Cory. The other side of it, just as a practitioner, it sucks when companies get bought that you're working closely with because you don't know what's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Cisco was famous for a long time of gobbling up whatever company that you loved working with and suddenly reproductizing it as a Cisco product. And it kind of, turned into milk toast or went away, right? Got subsumed because
it says my Linksys router
by the market. Your Linksys, right?
I actually do know what's going to happen every time a company gets acquired. The price of whatever it is that you were buying from them is going up.
It's going up. Absolutely. And you just don't know if are they going to leave it alone? Is Slack going to change because it got consumed by Salesforce, all of those kinds of questions. And usually they do change quite significantly. And you've invested this strategy around using the set of technologies. And now you're like, oh, crap, what's going to happen to this? Am I going to have to switch to something else, right? Or I don't like working with that vendor. What do we do now? or maybe it's one that you do like. So acquisitions have some back end consequences for people who are using those products that can be quite significant.
Jon, you can get the last word here because you can break the tie.
I agree with, it's kind of a bit of both. I'm not going to be wishy-washy, but I think in terms of what Cory is saying, there's limited use or limited options for major types of technology. But on the flip side, when you look at cybersecurity, DevOps, et cetera, I do think that's a very rich area, field of innovation, or at least options. But then again, we have limited options for the most popular technology. That's what it always comes down to. And that's why we have a kind of a blowback towards tech and its influence, and the fact that there are a handful of companies that have such a hold on our daily lives and such an influence on our daily lives.
All right. I would just conclude here that high interest rates are generally bad for tech. So if those numbers start coming down, you're going to see a lot more innovation, a lot more movement, and a lot more excitement in this space. I don't think we want to get to zero, but between zero and where they are now is a number that most of us probably be very comfortable with. We'll be back in a minute.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.
All right, folks, we're back and we're talking about the value of four-year degrees. This is a subject that is hotly debated in the land of technology because not all the things that we do in tech, require a four-year degree. And there's probably a lot of folks in this space who don't have one and don't see the need for one. There's a new report from, you'll find it on a website called intelligent.com. It says 1 in 3 companies have eliminated the need for bachelor degree requirements so far this year alone. And meanwhile, against that backdrop, we have the rise of AI, which may change the way we learn in the first place. But Cory, let's start with you. I know, you're on the beginning of a journey here with putting some kids through college. What's your sense of what is the value of a 4-year degree these days? And does everybody need one?
Well, put your money where your mouth is. I've got 3 tuition bills looking at me in the next 2 weeks, all for private universities, all of them more than $80,000 a year. So I'm clearly betting that the value of that education is going to be great for my kids. And I still have one more yet to go to college. But I think that it is reasonable to question the value of a lot of the degrees out there. Not all degrees are the same. I was once short a whole bunch of higher education companies, except they were lower education value companies in 2006 and 2007 and in 2007, 2008. I was short UTI, Apollo Group, Corinthian Colleges, COCO was the ticker, SECO was another one. And all those stocks went up as we went into a recession in 2008 because the belief is lots of people would enroll in those schools with government guaranteed loans, and they did. But most of the schools went out of business because they were committing fraud. They were promising results for their students illegally during cold calls to try to get students to enroll, getting them to sign up for government loans or government-backed loans, and letting those students default and not show up for class. And while the Obama administration went after those people, those schools and indeed those companies, and many of them went out of business, multi-billion-dollar businesses, it was because they weren't delivering value. They were giving degrees that didn't have value. And so I think that there is a differentiation, and it has begun, between crappy degrees that don't mean anything and a valuable education in college.
Interesting. Jon, what's your take? What are you seeing out in the valley there?
Well, we had just full disclosure, we have 4 kids. They all graduated from college, and I think 3 of the 4 ended up doing things that really were tangentially related to what they majored in. And
what was your major, Jon?
Journalism. I always knew what I wanted to do.
You're the one.
I was the only one left. I mean, among my friends, I think there were three of us who stayed in the field.
And where did you go?
Went to Georgia. So it was interesting. When I also think about this idea that when I was in college, I think it applies back then and it applies now, according to the study. Practical knowledge, pragmatic experience was the best form of education I had, right? I mean, learning in the job, in an internship, or doing something that was practically associated with what I was going to do. And I think one of the problems, Mike and Cory, is it goes back to a segment we had a couple of days ago. This idea that we want more specialized people, especially in AI. So there's all this pressure to produce more engineering projects more quickly with AI, which puts an incredible amount of pressure on the few people who are very well versed in that area. And I think Tracy Reagan made a very good point. She said that as far as curriculum in colleges and universities, what's the AI curriculum and how current is it, up to snuff? Who's teaching it? And I think that's probably the rub here, is that these companies especially want AI-ready engineers or what have you coming out of college, but are the colleges capable of producing those folks? So maybe it minimizes the importance of colleges, and maybe we go through, I don't know, some other type of programs for kids or for students that creates job opportunities for them.
Yeah, but the value, I think the value is learning how to learn and surrounding yourself with smart people who are engaged and who want to accomplish great things in the world. And I think that, the specifics of I remember my father talking about studying business as an undergrad at University of Michigan. Actually, went to grad school, University of Michigan, and he said, "Look, I learned how to fill in a ledger as an undergrad with a pencil, and how to keep books, and that knowledge was useless ultimately. But learning specific skills that are applicable in 2024 will surely be useless in 2044." But learning how to learn will never go out of style. And I think that that's the difference between vocational education and actual education.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, people learn on the fly. I mean, the people who are people are supposed to do this in journalism, although they really don't. I mean, they're resistant to technology. But my son, for instance, who went to Syracuse, who works for ESPN, he learned on the production engineering side on the fly. It was different than his college experience, and you have to adapt. You have to adapt in anything in life, right? You have to reinvent yourself every few years. If you don't, you become stagnant and you're not as employable or safe in your job as you are. I think that applies to not just education, but in terms of just once you started a job, how you progress and how you evolve.
Mike, what did you study?
I studied journalism, went to Boston University, and Go Terriers, and I'm still using some of the skills I learned there. I learned how to write a story and report it in under 45 minutes there, and I use that skill almost every day.
Yeah.
That's
Terriers and Bull. I feel surrounded.
Yeah, that's interesting, Mike. I mean, because that's a skill you can't teach really well. I mean, you have it. It's innate in terms of being able to turn something around, like a story, fast and knowing how to do it. And I've seen you do it. And there are very few reporters who can write on deadline. Yeah. So, some things you just can't teach.
Yeah, I've seen some of the younger kids come out, and I'm like, did they not teach these kids how to do this? Because I take it for granted. But
it's like second nature, right? Once you start doing it. But I mean, that's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, you're abused children. We've filed a deadline. It's torture.
Nothing more stressful. No.
And yet. And I can remember hearing these complaints even when I was graduating, right? CEOs were saying that kids are getting turned out of college, don't know enough, and don't have enough value proposition, and they wind up teaching them the skills in the first place or over again. And I know Jamie Dimon, I think, just said the same thing most recently about the kids that are coming out of college now. And it's been an ongoing complaint. Is there a disconnect between what occurs on the university level and what we need in real life and practical life? And can that ever be fixed, or should it be fixed? I don't know. Cory, what do you think?
I think about this all the time. What is the value of learning things that are, I Russell, John, my youngest son, Graham, he's very, I remember when he was when he was 8 years old, he's like, I will never, ever have to use Shakespeare. Why would I read a book?
Yeah.
Right. But the knowledge of knowledge, the value of knowledge is esoteric, but everything. And you don't know what you're going to need when you're going to need it. And I think that's 100% true that the value of a degree, because it's called a degree, let's go back to our original question, is not great. But the value of knowledge and learning is tremendous. It's maybe the most important thing. And it's important to differentiate what you're getting and how much you're getting it.
And there is a process of learning, right? Either you fast track something or kind of a longer process. I think there's nothing, sorry about this, there's nothing that you can teach about just doing something quickly. I guess that what I'm trying to say is college actually does have a valuable experience in a sense, because there's a diverse, broad swath of things we have to learn, whether we want to or not. And they sometimes apply later, as you mentioned, the Shakespeare reference. Sometimes you'll write a story or you're doing something and you kind of want to make a parallel to something that you had learned or something that was kind of off, and I think there is value in that, though.
I guess, though, are we putting too much emphasis on that degree is the question, because there are plenty of jobs out there that doesn't necessarily require that degree. And especially in tech, if I want to be an application developer, do I really need a 4-year degree? If I want to manage a Kubernetes cluster, do I really need a 4-year degree? Or are there just job positions where we've made that as a standard thing without thinking through why?
Well, think about how many successful tech entrepreneurs there have been, and how many of them have graduated from college, or how many haven't graduated from college. Think of Jobs. I think of Zuckerberg.
But those they're the exception, right? I mean, I remember when I was short UTI, I remember it was United Technical Institute, and they were charging people $65,000 for a year for a 2-year degree. So they're charging me $130,000 to learn to be a motorcycle mechanic, which is very appealing to like kids with motorcycles. But as a motorcycle mechanic, you make about $40,000 a year. And so these people would never pay off that loan. They would put themselves into permanent financial distress because they would default on their loans, default on their credit, and be behind the 8 ball from the start. And those degrees, I think, are worthless. But getting a degree from Boston College, from Syracuse, from USC, from Connecticut College, from Lehigh University, these are great institutions of learning where the people will do well and out-earn their peers. And when you look at the statistics about how much money a graduate from a 4-year private school, we're talking about all private schools there that I just listed, there are great public schools as well. Georgia is one. The earnings capability of those people is fantastic, and much better than people who didn't go there. But we've been so lucky to. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh no, I was going to say it's exponentially more, and in a sense, it opens doors. The open source for it also shows that you have the discipline. I think that's one thing. Is a college degree shows you have the discipline to go through a program and to learn something versus something off the street. I mean, I don't want to sound prejudicial or condescending, but in a sense, it shows that you can work within a system or within an institution and learn versus someone who shortcuts his way through or her way through.
I don't know.
The three of us have been blessed.
Today was the first time in 15 years that anybody ever asked me what college I went to.
Well, we've been really, really, really blessed by being in a profession where we get to learn all the time, and we get to say, I don't know at the beginning, and get to say, I still don't know, but I kind of know something more than I used to at the end. There is a Shakespeare line where it's like a fool thinks himself wise, and a wise man knows himself to be a fool. The journey of constant learning is a great joy, and I think that is discovered in a great collegiate education more than anything else. So I think that for that reason alone, college will always have some great college educations will always have value.
I'm not disputing the value of the experience and going to college and the people that I met. And I learned a lot of things that I probably never would have learned. And I enjoyed learning those things. I'm just not quite clear that the people who hired me after college gave a crap about any of that, because basically they didn't care.
How many times did somebody ask you what your grade point average was when they hired you, or asked you?
Remember what my grade point average was?
I do. No, sorry. But I mean, it's just like the other thing is people.
It's on your permanent record, Mike.
Along with a note from a nun in 8th grade. Yep.
Yeah. People just, I mean, once you're employed somewhere, you're judged on the work you do, not where you went to school. I mean, that helps you get through the door, maybe perhaps, but for the first few months. But ultimately, you're as good as the day you finish your job at work. I mean, you're not judged by your pedigree. That's just, although the irony in Silicon Valley is everyone is so obsessed with status symbols like your college degree, the car you drive, where you live, etc. Cory probably would agree with that. It's all very status.
And a Harvard degree only means you were good at something when you were 18.
That's true.
That is true too. I asked one guy once a long time ago, I said, what was the thing you learned in Harvard that, in business school that really stuck with you? And he said, well, it's easier to change something in motion and than it is if it's standing still. And I looked at him and I said, I think that's Boyle's law. I learned it in high school.
What was his response?
He kind of scratched his head. I guess he was a business major. He was like,
Or back to Lazard. Is it this scratch? Is it this? There's a head scratching theme here tonight.
There is. It's an ongoing theme, actually. All right, guys, I think we can all agree that there's value in college education. You should absolutely, if you can't afford one, get one because, well, it just makes you a better person. That said, one of the great things about tech is it's open to everybody. The water's fine, continues to be fine. And I've had the pleasure of working with all kinds of people, and I immensely enjoy and folks that I respect, regardless of how many college degrees they have. In fact, there are the folks who have more degrees than others who maybe I don't respect as much. It's all about the person. But anyway, gentlemen, thank you for being on the show, sharing your insights. And to everybody who's watching, stay tuned. We got a lot more coming on Techstrong TV.
Discover how Cloud Native is becoming the new compute stack. At Cloud Native Now on July 25th, we will explore the transformative shift towards modern containerized and microservices-based applications. Learn why Kubernetes remains a dominant force in container orchestration and how WebAssembly is emerging as a powerful complement. Don't miss this opportunity to stay ahead in cloud-native development. Register now and claim your spot in the future of tech innovation.